Well, hello everybody. Thanks very much for making time for this gentle stroll through our store collection, showing you um, aspects of our collection representing Mary Queen of Scots. I'm not going to show you everything, we haven't got time, but I can show you some generic examples. Most of what we have derives from four different areas, if you like. First of all, there's the consequences of the international exhibitions of 1888 and 1901, and then the later, what they call the Scottish National Exhibition of 1911, which helped establish the seat or the professorship of Scottish history and literature at Glasgow University. Then there are loans that have been made to on the back of these exhibitions of 1888 and 1901 and 1911, and most of those exhibitions were through private collections being lent for public displays, and the consequence of them is that people began to donate to the civic collections afterwards as a kind of legacy of these major events in Glasgow. And lastly, as the donations are made and collections are registered and catalogued, the aspects of the collection also shows where we need to reconcile old records to what we have today and try and find out what they are. So there's still an element of research to be done to reconcile registered collections with objects that we have today. And that's just standard fare in many a museum service. The date range of what I'm going to show you today in terms of accessioning and registering runs between about 1910 to about 2000. So the images that you see in front of you in terms of this context and collection slide show you on the bottom left-hand side what was the bishop's castle or palace, which was set up in 1888 to house Scottish history and archaeology on the banks of the Kelvin. And then above and around, we've got the 1901 and further shots of the 1911 exhibitions. And I've also included a slide of Provands Lordship up in the top right, because the Provands Lordship Society focused in on Mary Queen of Scots as a reason to visit the venue on Castle Street. They argue that Mary Queen of Scots stayed a night there or stayed some time there as she nursed Darnley back to health in the winter of 1567. And over a period of time, they developed their own Marian collection, and that in the 1980s came to Glasgow Museums. That's another dynamic or aspect of how our collection came together in Kelvin Hall. Next slide, please, Rachel. So first of all, we'll start with images that show Mary in her own way and using her own imagery, and that directly comes from coins more than anything. We don't have a coin collection at Kelvin Hall that can get near the quality of the Hunterian collection. If you want to see Marian coins, then please get in touch with the Hunterian. But what we do have is an enormous replica coin that was made in 1817, which is a copy of a Queen Mary Royale, or what's known as the Crookston dollar. Crookston as in Crookston Castle, which was on Darnley's family estate in Glasgow. And this was sent to the Botanic Gardens at the top of Byers Road. No, it wasn't. It was before then. The first Botanic Gardens in 1817. And it's an enormous thing. It's not the size of a coin in your pocket. It's about 50 centimeters wide, and it's very heavy. But I think it does show the importance or the primacy of coins and original historical objects, numismatic collections for this time to represent Mary or represent Scottish history and their significance. So that's an aspect of the collections there. Next slide, please. And another thing, these all are photographs dating to the 1920s. In today's world, you might easily reach for your smartphone or your Apple phone and look for digital interpretations of archaeological sites or all kinds of technology, but in the 1920s, photography was pretty much where it was at. And for societies like the Provands Lordship Society or other antiquarians, getting copies of photographs showing Marian objects, the death mask, for example, or the beads she's said to have worn at execution, or arms and armor said to have been used at the Battle of Langside, or the cradle said to have been used to keep her son James, later James II first, in, were all to have, to investigate and keep and look at and consider. So, you know, photography is another aspect of our collection in Kelvin Hall, old photographs. Next slide, please. And another aspect of our collection is facsimiles and copies of archives, which complement the photographs I just showed you. Again, these in terms of accessioning, nearly all come from the 1910s to the 1920s. What we're looking at here is an image of her execution at Fotheringay in Northamptonshire, and beside it is the warrant for her execution. So the two go together. So when they were collected, they came as a kind of joining together as a sequence and narrative. So you could understand how the objects, or in this case, the archives, sat together. And of course, this would then complement the photographs of the death masks and so on and so forth. So you could end up with a file, or more likely frames, as you can see this image of the execution at Fotheringay is being framed, sequence of two-dimensional art, which would complement or contrast your cabinet of coins and medals that you might have kept if you were a private antiquarian collector. So what Glasgow Museum's collection is doing is following the antiquarian traditions and also the modern techniques that were available at the time to record and share history in a populist way. Next slide, please. These images, well, in terms of registering, all come from, again, the 1920s, the 1910s, 1920s, but they actually show 18th and 19th century prints. At the center, we've got an 18th century English print showing Darnley and Mary together in happier days, holding hands, just wed, wish the couple well. And then we see a 19th century print above them of Mary's flight, Mary leaving to run to safety. Again, the drama is all hedged because we know that you know, Mary's marriage to Darnley wasn't the happiest and ended with Darnley's murder. And with Mary's flights, whether they're from Loch Leven or they're turned to England, we know that they're also hedged with tragedy. So they're kind of talking points within with how we understand her. And below we have framed works of her. Next, but could you go back a slide, please, Rachel? We have the prints of portraits of her, well-established portraits in English collections, but nevertheless reproduced as prints and sometimes framed as well. You can see a gold frame. I think these are just mass reproductions, and they are what they are, but they contrast quite well in Glasgow's collection to what we call the Morton portrait of Mary Queen of Scots, which came from the Earl of Morton's family and was bought by Glasgow Town Council, Glasgow Corporation in 1927 for £5,000. And it was the must-see painting of its time, where those were before we had Salvador Dali in the collection, and people used to queue up to see Mary Queen of Scots. So in her time, in the 1920s, so this hot spot of accessioning that I've been talking to you about, people were very keen to see images of Mary, and Mary was very much a talking point around how they understood Scottish history. And I guess with that comes a whole lot of historiography. You could start with 18th century histories by William Robertson or Dalrymple's Histories of Scotland, where they try and place Mary in terms of a narrative of union. That it was Mary and James and the Stuarts that started the union. And on and it goes. I'm not going to dwell on this, but in the 1920s, Glasgow, in 1925, voted for more conservative and unionist MPs than it had done previously. And there was a strong support for unionism. So with this narrative of Scottish history and where the Stuarts and Tudors sat in terms of creating Great Britain, and then a more contemporary political narrative around union in the 1920s, it kind of helps give a context for how the collections come together, apart from the impact of international exhibitions and public-minded collectors donating their collections in life. Okay, next slide, please. And in contrast to that, we have craft businesses, such as ceramicists. This is made by, I'll just double check, Trevor Wood from 1987. There was a print run of 2,500 made. It's manufactured by ISIS Designs Limited, and it comes in its original presentation box with a certificate of authenticity. Cost £14.95 in 1987. So we've got that kind of detail, but most of us, I guess, if you've been shopping in around heritage sites, usually you have to go through the shoppy and you will see knickknacks and commemoratives. And this is no different. It's a limited run, but it does show the commercialization of Mary. And I think in the background, we can probably see Linlithgow, where she was born on the 8th of December, 1542. Okay, next slide, please. And lastly, but not least, we also have, again, touching on commercial Mary, mass-produced historical figurines. I've called them dolls, but the companies that made them, like Peggy Nesbitt, who made the Mary's maid, that's Mary Seton in the light blue dress in the box above. In the 1963 Peggy Nesbitt catalogue is when she first features as a Scottish historical figurine. And then you have our Mary Queen of Scots doll beside her, which is not a Peggy Nesbitt doll. In fact, we don't know who manufactured this doll, but we do know it's Mary Queen of Scots. You can see with the cross and the pearl tier at the end of a dress. So it also throws out the question for me is about the importance of how people learn history in childhood and school, and also through play, and also as a commemorative piece, where Peggy Nesbitt dolls, for example, were collectors' pieces, and they were still collectors of Peggy Nesbitt historical dolls. They were there to spark conversation as much as a photograph or a print or a painting was. But it can be a conversation with a child equally as it can be a conversation with an adult. But you're still addressing how we learn history and who people are and what their values were and why are they important. And these are kind of questions we review nearly every day, I guess, when we watch the news or read a newspaper or talk about something of the moment, is we evaluate their importance. And I think, although with this collection of Kelvin Hall, I can't show you any gold coins or Mary's bling, I can show you examples of why and how people have commemorated Mary for exhibitions or for personal interest, and also how that personal interest can sometimes also be reflected in much wider mass-produced commercial interest in making money out of Mary. So the Kelvin Hall collection in its way is largely commemorative, it's largely commercial, but it does have an element of antiquarian interest, and it certainly has an element of reflecting Glasgow's exhibitions and also Glasgow's support of Scottish history as a serious subject. And that concludes my little 10-minute stroll with you. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I would like to welcome you to come to Kelvin Hall and see these objects for yourself, or if you have other interests in Scottish history, then please do get in touch with us.